What is going on, everybody? I am back today to continue my Oscar movie catch up. And the movie I'm going to be talking about today is not only one of the most anticipated movies I had for the Oscars and films that were nominated to watch, but also one of my most anticipated films of the year. And unfortunately, I did not get an opportunity to see this in the theater. My AMC chain near me never got it, unfortunately. And so it finally came to streaming, and I had the ability to watch it at home. And I was very excited for this movie for a multitude of reasons. For starters, I thought the subject matter was really fascinating, and the approach to the story sounded really unique. And I also love Jonathan Glazer. I recently reviewed Sexy Beast for my Criterion Corner segment, and it was my first time watching that movie, and I absolutely loved it. And Under the Skin is one of my favorite science fiction films of all time. It's such a unique movie tonally, it's visually captivating, and it's incredibly thought-provoking. And Glazer is an art house filmmaker, and so his films are very much outside of the norm. And what I will preface this review by saying, if you are not a fan of art house filmmaking, you're probably not gonna like this movie. It is incredibly unconventional. The intent Jonathan Glazer has with this movie is relatively simplistic when you think about it, but there are a lot of complexities in the way that the information is delivered to you. And I'm very excited to discuss this film today. And the movie I'm going to be talking about is The Zone of Interest. The Zone of Interest is directed by Jonathan Glazer. The commandant of Auschwitz, Rudolf Höss, and his wife Hedwig strive to build a dream life for their family in a house and a garden next to the camp. So, as I said, I was very excited to watch this movie. I'm a huge fan of Jonathan Glazer, and I thought the idea of the film was incredibly interesting. And this movie is phenomenal. It is absolutely outstanding. It is one of the best films nominated for an Academy Award this year. It is a movie that I have not stopped thinking about since I've watched it, and I do not think I will stop thinking about it for quite some time after. The one word I would use to simplistically define the film is haunting. It's a movie that makes you feel sick the entire time that you watch it. And I think the approach and the execution into how that is done and the way Jonathan Glazer is able to get under your skin with this material is incredible. It's truly just remarkable what he was able to pull off here. And I'm very excited to tell you about this movie today. So at the beginning of the film, we're introduced to Rudolf Höss, played by Christian Friedel, and his wife Hedwig, played by Sandra Hüller, who a lot of people know from the film Anatomy of a Fall this year. And they live in this house right outside of Auschwitz, and they have children and they have a dog, and they are trying to live a normal life as a family outside of a concentration camp where horrible, terrible acts of genocide are being committed, and the family tries to live this normal existence amidst that circumstance. And the entire film is the mundane existence of this Nazi family living outside of Auschwitz. And when Rudolf is visited by members of the Nazi Party, the planning that's going into the continuation of Auschwitz, learning about his involvement, and how the family reacts when things happen at the concentration camp, or how there is a lack of reaction to what is going on at the concentration camp. So as I said, this movie is not going to be for everyone. It is an art house movie. It is doing things very different than a traditional narrative film. It's not like you open the movie with long expositional dialogue saying this is a Nazi family living outside of Auschwitz and this is their experiences. You actually open the film with an incredible track from Mika Levy's score that is haunting and gets you in the mood for exactly what you're going to watch. It takes forever for the opening credit sequence to finish, and I love that there's just this black screen with the haunting score accompanying it to really get your mind set for what you're about to experience. The entire film, it's these little moments in these people's lives while you as an audience member are realizing the horrible atrocities that are occurring right next to them that are so much bigger than this family. And for starters, I want to talk about the performances. I think the performances in this are absolutely spectacular. I don't know how difficult it would be to be an actor portraying a Nazi. Like, it has to be a very difficult thing to do, and it has to be a very hard headspace to get in. And I think all of the performers in this do an incredible job. Obviously, I talked about Anatomy of a Fall at the beginning of the year. I am a huge fan of Sandra Hüller, and I think that she is a brilliant actress, and she does a phenomenal job playing an evil, horrible woman in this movie, and I thought that she was fantastic. I also thought Christian Friedel, who plays the lead character, did a fantastic job. The cinematography in this is absolutely spectacular. I feel like every scene, there's so much intentionality in the placement of the camera, and the camera is very static through most of the movie. It does not move very frequently. Jonathan Glazer is forcing you to look at something, and he wants you to look at everything in the frame, and he wants you to pay attention to little details. And I think that every time you watch this movie, you're going to get something different out of it, or pick up on some little nuance that he has incorporated in a specific scene. I loved the color in this movie. I feel like the utilization of color and the lack of color in specific scenes was incredible. And I feel like the intentionality of how it was saturated in that moment, and how bright the colors are, like in the family's garden, contrasted with when you're seeing shots of the wall of the concentration camp and how dull and gray and nasty they look. It just really creates that barrier in your mind as a viewer of like, okay, they're here, this is there, but they are impacted by what's going on. They're just choosing to ignore it. And I think the most important part of this movie is what it's trying to convey. Obviously, this is a movie about the Holocaust. The Holocaust is one of the most horrific times in our world's history. People were senselessly murdered solely for existing and being who they are. And it is one of the most tragic and horrific events that has ever happened. And I think it's really interesting to look at it from the perspective of the evil party. And I thought that it was really unique to see this family in a very isolated space trying to live their life, and how blatantly obvious everything horrible that's going on in the concentration camp is, and how each and every one of them choose to ignore it. And what I love that Jonathan Glazer did with this movie, every problem that faces the family is the dumbest, silliest, stupidest problem in the world, that just you as an audience member almost laughing how silly and dumb they think that these issues are comparatively to what the Jewish people are going through in these concentration camps. And I love that Jonathan Glazer intentionally makes all of the issues that the family have so silly and dumb. And it really packs a heavy emotional punch, because not only thinking about the Holocaust, I think about our society now, and whatever situation you're looking at, whether it be the conflict going on in Gaza right now, the mistreatment of the LGBTQ community in the United States of America, all of these things that are constantly occurring in our culture, that it's very easy to just turn it off. If you are a privileged person that is not living in that space, at any moment, if you're sick of hearing about it, or you don't want to know what's going on anymore, you can turn your TV off, or you can quit paying attention to what's on the internet. And that is not a luxury for the people who are involved in those situations. And I think Jonathan Glazer is making an incredibly powerful statement on ignorance to these situations, and people who choose to be ignorant of those situations. And obviously, this is in a more extreme sense, where the leader of the household is involved in committing those atrocities and doing those terrible things. It's really interesting the sequences that he chooses to use to convey those horrors. He's out at one point fishing with his family, swimming in this lake, and you see runoff from the concentration camp, and he digs down and literally finds a human jawbone, and he immediately goes to pull his family out of there because he's horrified as to what else might come through. And he knows he has committed these horrible atrocities, he just doesn't care. There's so many little subtle scenes, there's so many scenes in this movie that genuinely sent chills up my spine, that were so simple. It wasn't like you were seeing someone brutally murdered. It was like you saw, there was a sequence where the two children in the house are in their beds at night, and one of them's playing with the flashlight, and the little kid says, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Nothing." And it cuts up to him, and he's literally playing with teeth of some of the Jewish people that were killed in the concentration camp, that he got a hold of their teeth. And that just sends chills up your spine. It's the implication of the horrors that have occurred. And sometimes seeing the implied atrocity compared to actually just viewing the violence is more horrific. And that's what I thought was really impressive about this movie, is there were so many sequences like that. And then the sequences that involve the Jewish people, there's a scene where a young woman plays the piano in this movie of some music that she finds of one of the people in the concentration camp. And it is truly a powerful sequence. And it's one of the most beautiful scenes I've seen in a movie all year long. It honestly brought me to tears. There's a really unique cut towards the third act of this movie that shifts the story completely, and how Jonathan Glazer is telling it. It's a very art house decision, very unconventional decision, but I think it's a very powerful decision, and one that really stuck with me. The visuals are haunting, and honestly, thinking about the amount of Jewish people whose lives were taken solely because some moron set out to attack one group of people is truly heartbreaking. And anytime I watch a movie about the Holocaust, I find it really difficult to just process and think about all those lives that were lost. And this movie really is one of the best Holocaust films I've ever seen, because it's doing it in a very different way, where it's not just forcing you to look at that, it's not just forcing you to look at the atrocities head on, it's forcing you to realize that so many people in this time period knew these things were going on and ignored it. And that is very hard hitting. I didn't even talk about it yet, but the sound design in this movie is absolutely incredible. If this film does not win Best Sound Design, I just don't have any hope for cinema. The importance of sound in this movie and how sound plays a factor, hearing the screams and the gunshots and all the awful things that you as a viewer are forced to process throughout this movie, it creates the fear, and it does an amazing job at building that up inside of you as the viewer. And as I said at the beginning of this review, this is a horror movie. I mean, it is one of the most horrific films I've ever seen, and it's not necessarily because of what you are viewing, it's what you are hearing and what is being implied. And I think that the fact Jonathan Glazer was able to take a risk and do something like this and succeed so well is incredibly impressive. And as I said, I love Jonathan Glazer. I really look forward to whatever he's going to do in his career next. And if you're a fan of art house filmmaking, or if this sounds interesting to you, you're probably going to enjoy it. If you do not like art house cinema, you probably won't get a whole lot out of it. So have you seen The Zone of Interest? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was spectacular. It was incredibly well made, and it's saying something incredibly important. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.